Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Victor Paredes Colonia. I'm part of our ITAM business unit. And here I'm very excited to present with you and a few others our next live event. If you've been joining us in the past, we've had a couple of these different live events doing deep dives into different aspects of the product and the discipline around SAM. And today we are going to be talking about entitlements, software models, and the discovery models. And before we jump into that, just a few little announcements. The first and foremost, some of the information here is privileged and confidential, so please bear that in mind. In addition to that, we are going to have some forward-looking statements. We might respond to questions with a forward-looking statement, or we might have things displayed in the product that has some forward-looking statements as well. So bear that in mind as things are subject to change. But without further ado, I want to welcome everybody. This is another one of our ServiceNow events. Our commitment to you is to help all of our customers deploy, adopt, and achieve value with their investments in IT asset management, more specifically with software asset management. And today we're going to be looking around, getting a better understanding of the inner workings within SAM. So again, entitlements, discovery models, software models. And we're also bringing on Shankar, who is going to be part of our business unit to discuss a little bit more about that. So again, my name is Victor. I've been co-hosting this with Patrick Lounge for some time now, and we're really excited to have you all here with us today. And we're especially excited to have Shankar. Shankar is joining us from the product team, and Shankar's specialization is around software asset management as well as SaaS. And Shankar has a lot of different demonstrations he's going to show us today in product, as well as answer a lot of questions around entitlements and the different software models and discovery models. So Shankar, thank you for making the time. I know it's a little late where you are, but we appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. I'm glad to be on this call. Looking forward to this one.
For sure. And for everybody out there, we're going to focus on two topics. Again, entitlements and looking at what are some leading practices around that. We always get questions around what should I be doing with entitlements? What order should I be importing them? How should I import them? What's important? What's required? What's not required? So we'll try to address all of those and summarize those at the end of that segment. And at the same time, we'll jump into software models and discovery models. We'll peel back the onion, look at what are the inner workings between them, what's the difference between them, as well as how are they interrelated. As with everything, please use the chat. Please include your questions in the Q&A form. And let's stay laser focused on the topic of the day. So those are the two topics we're going to talk about, entitlements and the different software models and discovery models. So questions and comments, keep them to those. And if you have any experience using the product with those topics in mind, share those with all of us, right? I mean, we want to engage with you. We want to hear your comments. And there's other folks out here that probably want to learn from you as well. So use the chat. Okay, let's get started. So Shankar, one of the things that comes to my mind with entitlements, like anything else really with mining data and loading data into SAM, there's always a challenge. There's an initial barrier to entry, if you will. So what's the challenge with entitlements? How would you define that?
Yeah, so typically any SAM product, we find that entitlement creation itself is an issue. And part of the reason is because of the multiple sources that you would have within an organization, especially when they are moving to SAM for the first time, that they would find that there is a lot of information that's spread across the organization. That could be entitlements purchased using the legacy procurement systems, and those POs and PO lines would be sitting there. Then there are contracts which could be sitting in a totally different system. And you could also have contracts that are in PDF files or maybe even printed documents. So those are also lying around the organization. So you'll need to collate all this information and then be able to create the entitlements in the system. And with the advent of SaaS, anybody can purchase a software, just a credit card. So you would see that individual teams or maybe even individuals go ahead and they would be purchasing software on the internet, and they would be charging it through expenses in the system, which may be completely undetected by the IT department. So you would see that all these are also lying around the organization. So to collate all this information across all these various sources and be able to create the entitlement in SAM is itself a big challenge, and that's what most of our customers face. And as part of that, SAM, as out of the box, provides a lot of tools that enables creation of the entitlement, tries to make the life of a SAM admin much easier. So you could set up entitlements in the system using the guided setup, where specifically for those people who are new to SAM and new to ServiceNow, they may find it easier because it takes the user through a guided set of steps. It could also be useful for setting up certain entitlements where you're not sure where to start from. So the playbook would actually help you go through those steps and create the entitlement. And when you are migrating from another system or from a legacy system to SAM, or if you are renewing your entitlements every year, where you need to update a lot or create new entitlements in bulk, then the bulk import facility that we provide using a spreadsheet actually becomes very useful. The same feature is also extended to be able to import your Microsoft licensing MLS statements, and SAM automates the process for you. You can also set up your integrations to your procurement systems and import the PO and PO lines into ServiceNow so that you automate the process of creation of entitlements within SAM. You could also build custom integrations to other systems and download the information. And finally, if no other automation helps you, you could just create an entitlement using a form. So there are various ways in which you could do it, and today we'll probably look at 2 or 3 ways in which we can create entitlements in SAM.
Yeah, let's do that. And while you're bringing that up, I'm just going to summarize what I heard you say. So the biggest challenge in entitlements is gathering the information, right? Sometimes it's a very decentralized world out there with entitlements, things floating all over the place. But we've developed different ways that once you've collected all that information, how you can upload them. So I'd like to double click on that, Shankar. Do you have anything to show us?
Yeah, sure. So let me share my screen here. And can you see my software asset overview page?
I do. I see it.
All right. So this is the landing page when you log into SAM, and if you're on the software asset management workspace. So you get this landing page where you have this create entitlement UI action available. You can also go to the operations and license operations module, where you can see the entitlements list view, and you can create a new entitlement using the new action there. So today for this demo, we will do it from the software asset overview page. So when you click on this UI action, SAM pops up a window that provides you with 3 options. The first one is your guided step-by-step walkthrough, or what we call as entitlement playbook. The second one is importing entitlements in bulk using the spreadsheet. And the last one is what we call as the simple standard form, which allows you to enter an entitlement field by field. So we'll first start with the guided step-by-step walkthrough. You select that option and you click on next. So SAM then takes you to a page that renders with a few stages, each stage specifically about how you create the entitlements. The first stage, it collects information about the software product for which you want to create an entitlement for. The second would be the actual entitlement details in terms of the rights purchased. Third, you will provide additional details that you may use that would be helpful for your reporting purposes, and then you review and submit. So the first stage, when you get in, the first question that SAM is asking you is whether you're going to set this up for on-premise or SaaS. So you could set it up for on-premise, and the playbook would take you through the steps that would require you to do on-premise. If you choose SaaS, then the first question that it's going to ask you is whether you already set up the integration profile so that SAM can download the data from the SaaS product vendor's portal and be able to guide you through the remaining process. So for this demo, we'll go with the on-premise, and we will complete this step. The next question that SAM is asking you is the publisher part number. This is a very important aspect of license management in ServiceNow's software asset management, because the SAM content that we publish, we tie a lot of information around what we call as a publisher part number. This is the SKU that your publisher would provide to you when you purchase software licenses from the publisher. And I am insisting on the word publisher here because you could get part numbers from your resellers as well. Software resellers also issue a part number, but that is not the part number that we use in SAM. we go with the publisher part number that the publisher issues. And if you are buying your purchase licenses from your resellers, then please insist on getting the publisher part number that those softwares are associated with.
Yeah.
So we'll choose.
So I'm just gonna highlight that piece because that's really important, right? I mean, I've dealt with customers that say, hey, I can't find this part number, I can't find this publisher part number in your content, and oftentimes we ask, hey, what's the part number? And it ends up being the reseller's part number for that product, not the direct publisher part number from the actual vendor. So that's important, right? Our content is tied to the software vendor's part number, not the reseller's part number. And then you said another thing that was important, Shankar. You said the publisher part number is important because it generates the software model, which we'll get to later, but it generates a lot of automation in the back end. So I would say maybe anytime you do entitlements, having the publisher part number is extremely important. It's probably one of the preferred methods of creating an entitlement. Would that be correct?
That is correct. It is the suggested way of creating entitlements in SAM because, as you said, when you use the publisher part number, SAM knows all the content that is surrounding that particular software. It is able to create the software model. It is able to create the downgrade items. It is able to specify the lifecycle events. So all that information is published in the SAM content portal, and the PPN is that tool that you use to pull all the data out and create your entitlements and software model. So it automates the entire process. You don't have to do much after you use a PPN. If you don't use a PPN, then you'll have to set up most of the things yourself. You'll have to ensure that you use the right DMAP, and a lot more things happen when you don't use a PPN. So we'll complete this step and move to the next one, which is specifying the actual publisher part number. You will see that on this card there are two fields. One is the publisher part number, other is the software model. Both are required fields, but we will specify the publisher part number, and as I said earlier, this is the number that SAM uses to identify the software. So when I specify the PPN, SAM looks for the nearest matching software model for this particular PPN. If the software model doesn't exist, then SAM automatically creates a software model and populates it here.
So in that case, you had the publisher part number, and because we have it in the content, it's able to identify the software model associated to that part number.
That is right. If the publisher part number does not exist, then we suggest that you create a support request with the SAM content team and get it added so that you can use the PPN to create the entitlement. That's the preferred route that we recommend to our customers. So once we have identified the software product for which we want to manage licenses, we now specify the entitlement details. Using the information that is provided, some of the values are populated here, and choose the remaining information here. The reason why license type was not pre-populated is because some customers buy Visual Studio. This is the Visual Studio PPN, so they buy it as a subscription. Some customers buy it as perpetual from Microsoft. So since both are available, we do not pre-populate it here. Otherwise, you will see that license type and license metric also are populated based on the PPN that is provided. So once you have specified the license metric, the next is to specify the number of rights that you have purchased and complete this step. Now these two steps are sufficient for you to create an entitlement. However, we also have another stage where you specify other details. You could specify the company, location, and department for which this entitlement is associated with. So if you want to restrict the entitlement to be used by a specific department or for a specific location, there are certain instances that we have seen where you have some legal restrictions on using certain licenses outside a country. So you could specify the country as a location and restrict the entitlement usage there. And you could also have multiple companies defined within the organization, so you may want to restrict the usage of the entitlement to a specific company. So you could restrict the usage based on these, and these are all not required fields. If you want to use the entitlement for these, you could. And once you have specified these, you could complete this stage and go to the next task, which is to specify who is the owner of this license. This is typically somebody who is actually owning the budget. And then you also specify the finance aspects, from whom did you purchase, what invoice was used to pay for this license. You can also specify the GL account or the cost center. So these are various fields that are provided on the entitlement that allows you to define where the entitlement is being used. So all this can be used when you generate your reports. You can see how your entitlements are being consumed by various cost centers and by various locations or country, etc. So you could use these for your various reports. And then finally, we have the contract details that can be entered as well. We will skip this as well. And now that we have specified all the information required to create the entitlement, we are actually good to go. But we would first review what we had entered in the review stage. And if you want to make any changes, you could do that here. And once you're done, you click on finish. So the entitlement was created in build state, and you are redirected to the entitlement from the playbook.
So that guided setup is really designed for someone that is maybe fresh to importing entitlements or wants a little extra guidance around how to go through the proper steps. But you're saying once they've done it, they can actually access the entitlement record itself, which is what you're showing now. And I'm guessing they can review it one last time before they actually publish. Is that what happens next?
More than review, there are also other edits that you could do. So you may want to do your user allocations here, which ensures that this entitlement rights are consumed only by specified users, or at least preferences given to these users. You can also review the expense lines which are interfaced with your GL. You can verify your downgrade rights that are populated here if you have downgrade rights defined. And then once you're fine, you can see the state is built, which means this is still not consumed by your reconciliation process. So once you're comfortable with all that is here on this entitlement, you can choose to publish this. So when you publish, this entitlement state changes from build to in use.
So now it's active in SAM. Now it's active in SAM.
Yeah, it is active in SAM now. So it gets consumed by your reconciliation process. So the in-use state, also there are some conditions. So if it is a perpetual license, then it becomes in use automatically. If it is a SaaS subscription with a start date that is in the future, then this becomes on order and it automatically changes to in use on the date when it is active. So all those aspects are handled as part of the entitlement form. But you created this using the playbook, so you can see that in the activity stream as well, entitlement created using guided walkthrough. So you can use this information later on if you want to do an audit on any issues that you may have with your entitlements. So this is with how you create using the guided setup. Now let us go back and see how we can import entitlements. Now, for the sake of a demo, I am taking a spreadsheet with only 2 rows, but typically we have seen that your spreadsheets may have thousands of rows as well if you are importing for the first time. There are 2 types of import that you could do. The standard import document is to import any kind of entitlement, but if you are specifically looking for your Microsoft MLS statements, then you could import that as well, and SAM automates the process of creating the entitlements and even the contracts behind those for you. So the entire process of importing your Microsoft licenses can be automated using the MLS. For this demo, we'll go with the standard import document. You can download the template for this from the UI action here. Populate the template with the entitlement details. So I have 2 rows in this entitlement, as I had said earlier. So it's uploading it now. So again, there's a difference between what we had till Paris and maybe till Rome and in San Diego and beyond, where we changed the import functionality from a synchronous process to asynchronous. So you don't have to necessarily wait to upload the entire set of rows in the entitlement and get them processed. You could click on import and it submits a background job, and you could come back and check for the status of that on the software asset overview. So I will click on import here now. And it has been submitted, and you can actually go back to your software asset overview, and if you refresh this page, you will see that there is a new alert and a new notification for the spreadsheet import job that was completed. The reason why there is a new alert is because there are actually 2 errors, and this is the completion notification which says the import was completed but with errors. So let us now go into the import errors to see what import errors were identified by the import process. So there are 2 here, and we will take a look at one of these. So if you see the error here, you see that the publisher part number is incorrect, and SAM automatically says that if you do not have the right publisher part number, you might want to probably create a custom PPN and still upload this entitlement. Otherwise, you could just delete this and choose to import without the publisher part number. Now what SAM does is it tries to identify the closest software model and then creates the entitlement and associates it with that software model. So this is the entitlement that was created. So let's now go back to the import record here. You will see that one entitlement has been created. There is one more error which you could still go and review and import that as well. You will now open this, and you will see that this doesn't have a publisher part number, but it has identified that this is a software model that matches the entitlement record to the maximum extent. So it would actually look at publisher, product, vendor, and edition to match this. So that's the other way in which you could create entitlements, by importing them in bulk using the spreadsheet. And the last option is your form, the standard form. We have already seen this when we saw all those entitlements, but when we go here, you could see that it has all the fields that are needed. You could specify the PPN here, and it would automatically populate some of the fields. As you can see, the metric group changed from common to Microsoft. This changed from perpetual to none because of the reason I already mentioned earlier, and then you could continue creating the entitlement like we did before. So that's what I had as part of the demo for these 3 different ways of creating the entitlements.
Yeah, three different methods, right? So the guided setup gives you the play-by-play, so to speak. The bulk file import, gives you the ability to include a lot of different records. You might have some issues or errors from time to time, so you'll be able to troubleshoot those, but that's part of the practice of uploading entitlements. And then individual entry. That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Shankar. Now, you've been in entitlements for quite some time here with the product development and things like that. So if you were to summarize leading practices around entitlements, what would you say are what we call our 8 leading practices?
So essentially what we have seen is customers who try to structure their import in batches or in phases, they are far more successful. So you could split the, when you're doing it for the first time, you may have hundreds or thousands of entitlements. So if you split them into batches, say publisher like batches, so you may have one batch for Microsoft entitlements, you may have another for Oracle. So if you split your entitlements into different batches and do it one at a time, that actually helps, because some of the issues that you face when you import for the same publisher would be very similar, so it will be easier to fix as well. You may also want to gain experience in a variety of import methods. So you could import it in split the entitlements, import it, and then you could also have other import methods like importing from your purchasing systems, getting the data in. So it's essentially get the data into SAM so that the rest of the automation process is handled by SAM. And once you have identified the entitlements to import, please have a very good plan to ensure that you're having a structured way of loading the information, And after you load the information into SAM, you have a way to verify that all the entitlements that were created, the software models that are created, they are all accurate, because the data that is entered in the entitlements on the software models, these are used by your reconciliation process. It would impact your license consumption. It would also impact your compliance position. So it's very important that you ensure that the data entered is accurate. Leverage the PPN as much as possible. We've already spoken about this. All the SAM content data is structured around the PPN, the DMAP, the downgrade rights, the life cycles. Everything is structured around this. So it's best to use the PPN because it automates the maximum extent possible. Again, when you are importing entitlements for your on-premise applications, you would create the entitlement, and using the PPN, wherever possible, it automates the creation of the software model, and then you can start discovering your software installs to ensure that your reconciliation process can match the software installs discovered with the entitlement. On the other hand, the SaaS works in the reverse order. You first configure your integration profiles, you download the data from your SaaS vendors portal, and using that information, SAM creates the software model, and you define the entitlement for that software model. So it's kind of a reverse process, and we have seen that this actually makes it a little more accurate, because the data that you get from your SaaS vendors portal is far more accurate than what you get from the license documents that you have, the purchase orders and other documents, contracts. This works better.
Yeah, so let me double click on that. So in on-premise world, if I have software, I'm going to load my entitlements first, and then it's going to generate the software model, and then I'll worry about linking those to the installed software, if you will. If it's SaaS, it's the other way around. I'm going to link up my SaaS integration first, pull in all the subscription data, and it's through that ingestion of data that my software model is created, and then I can associate entitlements to that software model. Is that what you said?
That is right, yeah.
Okay, great.
We did see about user allocations. I mentioned that user allocations helps you prioritize who consumes the rights first. Similarly, you can also do your device allocations for those entitlements where you use per device or per server license metrics. So you ensure that those devices consume the rights first before other devices consume them. Install condition, this comes into use specifically for software that you want to control on where it is being used and how the rights are consumed. One example that I would have is Microsoft Visual Studio, which provides you access to some 400, 500 different Microsoft products, but with the condition that you can use those products, you can install them and use them only in a development or test environment. If you use them in a production environment, then you are non-compliant. It is not just a production environment, but even if it is on a VM or a server with two VMs, where one VM has a production instance running and another VM, if you install the software using Visual Studio, it is still a violation of Microsoft's terms and conditions. So you would have to be very careful where it is consumed. So use install conditions to specify exactly those software models, those devices which are either development or test environments, and you do not consume those rights for any other environment.
Yeah, this is great. I think we probably should just jump right into some questions that are about things we just talked about, and a few questions from earlier. It might even be better to answer some of these questions by pulling up just a blank software entitlement form. So if you wouldn't mind, Shankar, go ahead and take the screen share back, and I'll ask you some of these questions that I'm seeing come through. But yeah, sure. Just pull up a basic, kind of a manual entry, and we'll go into some of these questions. So I think I'm going to take these in a few different orders here. So Sean asked a good question. What we just said was, hey, it's better to get entitlement data in there before you start pulling in those on-premise installs. So his question is kind of the opposite. He says, well, if we're already discovering on-prem software, but we haven't loaded entitlements, should we delete the install records or something else? What's our recommendation if you're already having installs created but haven't done entitlements yet?
Yeah, you wouldn't need to delete them. They would still be there, and you'll have to ensure that the SAM background jobs run so that the discovery models are created using the information on the install records. So okay. Don't stop. You don't have to delete them and rediscover them. That is not required. But it is just that when you are doing it for the first time, the process is you define the entitlements, the software model, then you discover, and then it works.
Yep. Okay. And so this is brings me to the next question. Is we talked a little bit about using PPN. A really good question came through a little bit ago from Teresa. She says, some smaller companies don't have publisher part numbers, and so what would be our recommendation here? If should we create a manual or a custom software entitlement or custom part number? So can you maybe speak to what if we don't have a PPN? Do we need to provide anything to content team to help them create that?
No, if you do not have a PPN, then you cannot use it, but you'll have to ensure that at least the software model that you'll be creating, you are using a DMAP that is published by the SAM content team. So if you do not find a DMAP that matches the product that you have purchased, then you would probably want to raise a support request with the SAM content team, get the DMAP added, and then use that to create a software model.
And sometimes if the very specific part of the software, if it's not listed anywhere publicly, just be prepared. The content team might ask for verification, like for example, a purchase record or something that where the vendor you bought from is showing or describing the software as kind of proof that this product really does exist. So just be prepared for that too. Let's on this demo here. Can you just briefly touch on? There's some questions around, what does software look like, entitlements look like with maintenance? So can you maybe just pull down those examples again on the license detail for perpetual or maintenance? Maybe talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so you could create the entitlements for maintenance type as well. So the license type, you have perpetual plus maintenance, where you buy the perpetual licenses. IBM typically provides this, where when you buy perpetual licenses, you also buy the maintenance, and the maintenance is for a period of 1 year for the first time. So that's a perpetual plus maintenance. And then when you renew your maintenance, because the perpetual licenses are still with you, then you would use only the maintenance type.
Yeah.
So you could use these two to define your maintenance entitlements.
Okay. And that kind of brings us to a question. Someone was asking here, the what's the license type you choose if the entitlement is for a subscription-based software, but with maintenance and software assurance. And keeping in mind that when you say subscription, there's a purchase method and there's a software delivery method. If the software delivery method is installed, but they're selling it to you through like a subscription payment method, which, for example, Adobe, great example, it's actually an on-premise software product. They can say cloud all day long, but as long as it is installed and deployed with an install, that's a great example. But I think with Microsoft, you're also alluding to that question about software assurance. So most pure SaaS products, there's no such thing as software assurance. As long as you own an active license, they're going to push updates all the time, and you're entitled to those updates unless it's a whole new product. So maybe, Shankar, could you just touch to the question of what if I've got like Office 365, or I've got an install that still has maintenance?
Yeah, you could define the agreement type here. This is not populating here because of the data here, but you would see the software assurance pop up here as the agreement type. So you could choose that, and then you could choose to define your license type as perpetual or subscription based on the type of licensing that you've done. And then choose Microsoft here, and you would choose, when you choose perpetual, you'll get various per user, per device, etc.
That's right.
When you choose subscription, you are restricted to only, I think, it's not refreshing here.
It's the kind of some different details there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, Peter asked the question about, what does the guided setup look like for a subscription product? We're just going to point you to, to actually, make that integration happen first in guided setup. So that's the biggest change, is we're pointing you a way to do some work before you pull in the entitlements, which is fine. So I think, you touched on that, but if you instead of on-premise, you have subscription, you'll see kind of the experience kind of change. And as Shankar is pulling up right here. So yeah, that's just a good example. Again, we're trying to guide you through the best way to set this up. So if you said it was a SaaS product, you'll notice that the steps will change to kind of focus on, pulling in that data from the API integration, which you can see right here. If it's been set up, then great. But if it's not, we'll probably move you towards setting that up.
That is
okay,
right. So if you choose no, then it will ask you to first set it up before you proceed with the creation of the entitlement. So
Yes.
if you say yes, then it will ask you to choose which type of integration that you have set up, direct or SSO, and based on that, you choose the integration profile. When you choose the integration profile, then it will provide you with the software model that is associated with this entitlement.
That's right. That's right. And one other question that just came up was, what if you don't have a PPN and you're trying to find the software model? This is probably, I'm guessing this is back to that page we were just looking at, Shankar, like just the blank software entitlement form. And someone was asking, how did you pull up the software model if you don't have the entitlement? Do you just search for it there, or how do you get to it?
Yes, you can go here and search for the software model if it has already been created. If you do not have the PPN, then there's quite likely that the software model is also not created. So if that is the case, then you have to go to the license operations module, create a new software model, and then come to the entitlement form to select the software model. Otherwise,
okay.
you could just pop this up, and if it's already existing, you could choose the software model here.
That's excellent. Cool. Excellent. Great. So good. Oh, I do see one other question here we'll try to get to. Is there any way to connect the retired entitlements to the current entitlement, especially within the current entitlement record? What do you think, Shankar?
I don't think you can add them, but if you have created a new maintenance entitlement from an expired maintenance entitlement, or if you have upgraded, then the related entitlements are automatically added to the new entitlement. Similarly, if you create a reserve entitlement for Office 365, the reserve entitlement will have the original entitlement as a related entitlement. So those are automatically added by SAM, but you cannot explicitly add. That feature doesn't exist here.
Yeah. And Lisa, you're asking a good follow-up. I'll go ahead and put this in. On the Adobe question, there are some customers that still have Adobe installs that they're paying for, and they're tracking maintenance and upgrades on them. So if you still are, you have some of those licenses, kind of legacy licenses that you're tracking, those would be on-prem and perpetual. But most of the customers have been kind of, pushed over to the subscription model. And in that case, again, you're not tracking the maintenance costs on it, because generally speaking, again, you have that all apps or single apps license, which entitles you to any of those versions down below. So it's different. If you're primarily on the subscription model with Adobe, that would be a specific example. We can go offline more on that if you want, but that's the short answer. And and we're going to go back and kind of a lot of great questions, but let's get into this next phase. If you, Shankar, I'll steal the share back, and we'll talk about what's the difference between software models and discover and DMAPs. We keep talking about DMAPs or these discovery models, and that's basically a DMAP is the same thing as a discovery model. So Victor, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So Shankar, let's go into kind of the data schema behind SAM, and interchangeably, a lot of folks talk about software models, discovery models, DMAPs. There are differences between them. I just want to learn from you directly. How would you define a software model? What is it? And what are some important attributes associated to software models? Let's start there first.
Yeah, software model is that entity in SAM that represents the product, the software product that you are trying to manage its licenses. So when you define a software model, you're identifying it as, the publisher is Adobe, the product is Creative Cloud, the product type is licensable, and a version is because it's a SaaS product, it's anything. If it is Office 365, it will again be anything. If it is Microsoft Office, you would say version is 2016. So you would specify exactly all those attributes of the software as part of this software model. So define the product essentially. In addition to identifying what the software product is, the software model also includes other information like your, if it is a suite, for example, it would have all the suite components. Office 365 would have all the other Office products, including your Access database, and depending on the plan, if you are an E5 plan, you get access to a lot of other Microsoft products as part of Office 365 subscription. So those will be added as suite components. Similarly, Visual Studio will have 400 plus suite components. So those are also specified on the software model. The software model also specifies what are the downgrade rights applicable, what are the life cycles that have been defined by the publisher, and all that information is also populated as part of the software model. That is, all this information is used by your reconciliation engine when it tries to reconcile the software installs and consume the rights based on how the software model is defined. So if you have an entitlement defined for Office SQL Server 2016, and the downgrade rights covers for 2013, and then the reconciliation engine would know that it can cover the rights for the downgrade rights as well. So that information is all available as part of the software model.
So the software model contains all of the attributes associated to that particular product title and edition. It's coming from content, if you will. Is it something that you would have customers create on their own, or is there a way to say, use the one that comes out of content first, and then if you need to change anything to software models, then you can do that? Is that kind of the way to do it?
Yeah, it is recommended that you use what comes from the SAM content. So if you use the PPN, then the software model is automatically created using the PPN data, and you use that software model. If you do not have a PPN, then you will have to define the software model using a DMAP. The DMAP is again published by the SAM content team. If you use a DMAP, then all the information that I just spoke about, they're all auto-populated if it's available. If you want to create a software model from scratch without using a DMAP, then you'll have to define every single component, and that is more likely to lead to errors, and your compliance position could be erroneous.
Got it. Let's transition then to discovery models. And can you define that for us and help us understand what's that all about?
Yeah, so the entitlement and the software model are one end of the spectrum of your software license management in SAM. The other end of the spectrum is on the discovery side, where when you discover install records using various tools, it could be discovery, it could be SCCM, it could be JAMF. So when you discover all that information and CMDB is populated, the install records are then processed by SAM to create what we call as discovery models. As the name suggests, this is a model that is based on the discovered records. So what you see on the right-hand side on the screenshot are the values that SAM discovers from the installed records. So that's why it's a discovered publisher or discovered product. Based on the publisher, they have different ways of signing an install record, so the information is populated based on that. But then for us to be able to map this to a software model, because we need to, at the end of the day, consume rights from the entitlement that's on the software model, we need to normalize this data. So the normalization rules are published by the SAM content team again, that normalizes the discovered value to what has been defined in the software library. So you can see here that Oracle is normalizing itself to Oracle, but the database server enterprise is actually normalizing to DB product for the DB server as a product, and enterprise is actually the edition. So it actually splits the data into two different fields. Similarly, 12.1.0 is the discovered version that is normalized to 12C. So this normalization rules are all published by the SAM content team, and that helps the SAM to normalize the values that is discovered. And once the discovery model is normalized, then it is able to identify the DMAP that is associated with this discovery, with these values of publisher, product, version, edition, language, etc., and associate it itself with the software model. So once that link is established, then the entitlement, the software model, the DMAP, with the discovery model, the install records, they're all linked, and the linking factor between these two extremes of the spectrum is the DMAP.
Got it. Yeah, we actually had a live event last week, I believe it was, where we talked about normalization and how that works. So I appreciate you doing a quick summary of how that's discovered and what's used in terms of normalization. This next slide that we have talks about that spectrum that you spoke about. So on one hand, on the left-hand side, you have the entitlements, and on the right-hand side, you have the software installations. And in between, you have the software model, the discovery model, and the discovery map. So it looks like that connective tissue is the discovery map. And the two data points coming in from the left-hand side, you have entitlement records, which you showed us today. And on the right-hand side, you have software installation data that goes through its normalization process. And eventually they connect. And so that's how they're interconnected, right? Could you show us in the product how they're interconnected?
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is an entitlement that has been defined for Windows Server 2008 R2 standard. So when I open this entitlement, you will find that, you know, this is actually defined for a software model, which is for Windows Server 2008 R2. Let me open this software model. So from the entitlement, I can navigate to the software model. You can see that this has a lot of attributes defined. I think this is part of a CIS instance, so it has a parent as well. Let me go to more, and you can see that there is a matching discovery model for this software model. So when I click on this, the related list opens and I can see the matching discovery models. Typically, if you have many install records across various versions, you would see many discovery models here. So I click open the discovery model now, and you can see that this is the discovery model which had these values. So you can see the discovered publisher was actually Microsoft Corporation. Now this gets normalized to Microsoft, which is the value that we have in our library. Similarly, the discovered product is this. It gets split across as Windows Server as a product, version is 2000 R2, edition is standard. So this is how the normalization happens. And once it is normalized, then all the install records that were used to create this discovery model, now these are associated with the software model. So when the entitlement, when the reconciliation runs, the entitlement rights are consumed against these devices or these installations. So this is how you can see that all these entities, which are seemingly on their own, but they are linked because of that DMAP that is used to link all these entities.
That's great. So the publisher part number creates the software model, and the installation records create the discovery model and the DMAP, and that finds the software model and it marries those two entities together so that when you're running reconciliation, you are correctly assigning the right entitlements to the right installations.
That is right.
That's fantastic. Well, I see a lot of questions coming through. Let's take a look at some of those.
Okay, let's jump right in with this kind of basic question from Sharon about who. Well, her question is what, but I think the other part of that is who sets the normalization rules between discovery model and the software models. So Shankar, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it is the SAM content team. So what we have is a way for customers to opt in for the SAM content service. So when you create, when you bring in your discovery or install records and the discovery models are created, these get normalized by the out-of-the-box normalization rules that are available. Sometimes some of the values that are discovered, they wouldn't get normalized because we wouldn't have encountered those earlier. So when those discovery models are identified, they could be in partially normalized status or they could be in manually normalized status. When these discovery models are identified, if you had opted in for the SAM content service, the information about the discovery model and the values that have been normalized and not normalized, these are sent back to the SAM content team. And they review it, and when they realize that there are some normalization rules that are missing, they create these normalization rules and they republish them back. And when the next content download happens in your instance, the new normalization rules are downloaded and your partially normalized or manually normalized discovery models become fully normalized. So that's how SAM content team discovers new normalization rules based on customer usage.
That's great. Okay, and yes, I think when you say software asset management content, the content service, every customer that's software asset management professional and enterprise, that's the product we're talking about today, those customers automatically get content from that team. So even if you don't opt into content, you don't opt in to share your content, and you just want to receive the out-of-box matching and models, you'd be able to interact with that content team kind of out of the box. That would turn on. We talk about this in activation plugins in a previous live event. So yeah, the opting in just means that you're sharing some more information with them, and you're willing to basically let them look at your data and be able to improve the content service based on the specific data that you want to provide to it. So Sharon, you can find out some more by looking at our previous live event on that topic. I want to go to this next question from Princess here. She says, I know we can create custom DMAPs. How do custom DMAPs affect software entitlements, and how is the information in the software model updated with that custom DMAP?
So when you create a custom DMAP, SAM uses the information that you have provided on the custom DMAP to create the software model for you. And but unfortunately, that software model that gets created would not have all the other details that typically happens when the SAM content team publishes them. The downgrade rights, and those may not be populated. So you'll have to still create the software model, edit them, add all that information that is required for the software model, and then you create an entitlement. Use this software model as a reference on that entitlement, and create it. So then you should be able to start using that.
Okay.
So the only difference is how the software model is created. Otherwise, the process is still the same.
Okay, excellent. And then I see one final question here, which might be a question a little bit more for the strategic portfolio management business unit, because it's in relation to their products for business applications. So her question is, what makes an application a business application? Should all service models be part of the business application table? So that's just if you want to speak to that, Shankar, you can, or else we can, point Mirna over to that other team to answer that.
Yeah, this is an APM functionality, so you can use APM to define the business application, but I don't know the details of how the service models are part of this.
Yeah. So we bring in the software model, and particularly the lifecycle dates that really make TPM very helpful and valuable. So hopefully that is something you can follow up with your account team and get more information on. So great. And I just see a question coming in from Alicia. We have a few more minutes here. So any final questions, get those in here. So the question here is the content library more usable for different industries? Do you want to speak to that, Shankar?
Not really. The SAM content is actually industry agnostic. It is essentially, it covers software applications that are used across various industries. And it doesn't really make one industry, the content being more useful for one industry versus another. It's the same for all. It depends on the type of applications that are being used. Manufacturing industries that may use more of engineering apps applications, they would see that the content still contains all information that they would need to manage their engineering applications. So it is agnostic of industry.
And as your follow-up question kind of indicates, Alicia, we do have a lot of very large healthcare systems that are using our software today, and have seen lots of, again, their healthcare software covered. The bigger issue we find is when you have companies that you work for that create a lot of their own software, their custom software, or they use a lot of open source software. So it's a combination of open source and custom. That's where you run into more of those issues. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more color. It's not necessarily industry verticals. It's more about how custom is it, and is it not even in the market, which is it's valid to track that, just not something we're going to have out of box, obviously. So hopefully that's enlightening there. I see your responses. That's great. And I think I'll go here to let's see here, Luis. Last question we'll answer. Which application, service, software, hardware, is there a script called, and there's a specific script called the product model assignment, which if set to true can automatically create the model based on business applications. So there's some very technical questions, Luis, you should probably go ahead and bring up with your account team. We'll probably get a little bit too detailed here for that. Last, I guess this is the last one, Princess, we'll give it to you. The PPN is not entered. Will the downgrade rights and lifecycle data still be able to populate? I'm thinking, Shankar, the answer is no. Would you confirm that?
Yes, it would. But if you have to use the right DMAP, if you can pick the right DMAP, then you will be able to create the software model, and the data would get auto-populated. The PPN helps in identifying the right DMAP. So that's where you are recommended to use the PPN.
Yeah. Yep. That's excellent. Well, great. And yes, we talked a little bit about the James as well, just being able to automate this process by pulling in software entitlements, through procurement systems, and we see a lot of customers doing that as well. So think with that, Victor, I'm going to hand it back to you. What resources do we have to make this easier for customers after this live event for them to go and maybe learn more?
Yeah, well, we have a lot. Some of those are just highlighted here for everybody. We spoke to some of these, or we've gathered information from some of these. So if you want to go more in depth from a user guide perspective or white paper perspective, we have the import entitlement user guide. That is really going to summarize everything that Shankar demonstrated today and talked about with some key examples in there as well. There's a couple other white papers I would just highlight. One about keeping asset data accurate by tracking your software entitlements. That's just a nice story, if you will, around that. But then there's also a lot of customers migrating off of Flexera into ServiceNow. And so how do you do that? And we have a lot of best practices around that, as well as some step-by-step instructions on how to do that. And then Shankar did highlight more specifically around Microsoft Visual Studio, how to do license management for that with respect to an emphasis on managing the software models and the entitlements. So that is something that we're also going to be posting when we post this recording in the community. And then it goes without saying, but training is always very, very crucial. And one of the best trainings that we have out there right now is Import Basics for Software Asset Management, which is free of charge. It shouldn't take more than about 20, 25 minutes max. And there's also some embedded content in there that allows you to download some cheat sheets along the way. And last but not least, the ITAM community. That is our central hub where you're going to find all of our content, all of our information. We have our Getting Started guide, which I tell people is our central compass or central focal point to start. There you're going to have a summary of all the information on how to set up for success. But then we also have a library of documentation and links to trainings that we've shared in the past. So that's a good place to segue and start when you're going to start your journey. So with that said, I think it's now a good time to just say goodbye. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Shankar, I really appreciate your time. Again, I know you're on the other side of the world, so we really appreciate you helping us with this. Patrick, kudos to you. Thanks for helping me with all of this as well. And to everybody that's out there, great questions. We really appreciate the feedback. And we'll put on more of these, hitting on different topics. So we hope to see you more in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.